Welcome back to Long Haul Coaching. I'm Candace McGarvey. In this video, I'm going to talk about the last 3 of my 6 coping strategies that will change your experience as a long hauler. Each of these strategies represents a way of thinking that will boost your recovery process and improve your quality of life in the meantime. When you look at the science behind human transformation, data shows unequivocally that transformation happens most effectively in baby steps. You may even remember that scene decades ago from What About Bob? Richard Dreyfuss plays a therapist to his patient Bob, who is played by Bill Murray, and let's just say Bob has some issues and suffers from overwhelm. Richard Dreyfuss's character explains to Bob the groundbreaking concept that is baby steps. It means setting small, reasonable goals, one tiny step at a time. For instance, when you leave this office, don't think of everything you have to do to get out of the building. Just think of what you must do to get out of this room. And then, in the hall, deal with that hall, and so forth. If we measure our progress in baby steps, we will not only be able to reach our smaller goals, we will begin to see a positive trend, even if our progress includes taking steps backwards along the way. Overall, we're making progress towards getting better. As we set up new expectations, what does recovery look like? Let's take a look at the recovery process on paper. If we wanted to map it out on a continuum of states of being, on one end we would have the bottom of the barrel, doldrums. That place where your only hope is that you can't sink down any further. On the other end of the spectrum is thriving. It's good to think about thriving, but if you're watching this video, you're not likely there yet. You're probably somewhere in the middle camp and setting a decently low bar because we are surviving. There are some keys to continuing to survive. Instead of having a fixed mindset as you envision recovery, look at your recovery on a spectrum. And instead of setting goals according to the endpoints, make your goals about steps in a particular direction. In this way of thinking, you can take a step towards better, or you can take a step backwards. Fair warning, you will need to let go of the idea that you have total control over which way you step. If we have learned anything with this illness, it's that we don't get to call the shots with some mind over matter magic. For the time being, life is going to be different. We don't know how long that will last for you, but do everything you can to not waste this experience. Many of us felt like we were happy with the old way of living. If that's the case for you, you need to recognize that what you're doing right now is grieving. You lost the old way of life, and that's brutal. Grieving that loss is an important part of your recovery process. So you may want to go research it or process the idea through a conversation with someone you trust to listen and pull you back from the edge when you feel like you're at the lowest point on the spectrum. While you are grieving, it might be a good time to at least entertain the idea that the recent turn of events could be a new opportunity to redesign your life. I know that sounds Pollyanna, but at least consider the possibility. I mean, what if this illness is going to lead to your eventual thriving? Yes, it stopped you from the life you were leading before, and this current surviving feels like crap. That's because change is never easy. Even when things are changing for good, change is stressful. So as we work on making small steps in progress toward our healing, it's important to remember today is not tomorrow, and it doesn't foretell tomorrow. Just because I've had a bad streak of days or even weeks, it does not mean that tomorrow can't be better. I've heard long haulers say they are sick of hearing people tell them, well, at least you survived, because while yes, we are alive, we feel like our quality of life is gone. This survivor's remorse is common and completely understandable. But as I always say, just don't get stuck there. Today may suck, but maybe tomorrow will be ever so slightly better. This goes back to the baby steps idea, because in order to track our very slow process from surviving to thriving, we may need to use a new unit of measurement. I call it thimbles full. If we were trying to measure our progress in liquid gallons or even cups, we wouldn't be able to recognize small improvements that are taking place, so we would think we aren't making any progress. But if we measure our progress in thimbles, now we can acknowledge those small changes and the positive trend they represent. So consider putting a thimble on your nightstand to remind you of today's small victories. Pretty soon, you'll get to upgrade to shot glasses. Our sixth strategy for recovery is one that may sound so obvious it isn't even worth mentioning, but too bad, we're going there anyway. Laughter. Laughter is an activity you can still do, and it has the power to override every other emotion. In other words, you cannot laugh and cry at the same time. Yes, I know you can vacillate back and forth between the two rather maniacally. Don't ask me how I know that. But when you laugh, your facial and vocal structures get hijacked by a more positive emotion. How? Well, the science of laughter is not yet completely understood, but we do know some key factors. For one thing, laughter stimulates the release of endorphins. And as Elle Woods taught us in Legally Blonde, endorphins don't usually lead to terrible decision making. So, as cheesy as it sounds, laughter really is the best medicine. Now, maybe your lungs can't handle full-on laughter yet, so go slow. Find something to watch that will just give you a chuckle. Like, if you're still having SOB, that's the rather appropriate acronym long haulers use to describe shortness of breath. If SOB is still a problem, don't jump straight into John Mulaney's stand-up comedy. That's like interval training for athletes. You'll get there eventually. But you might start slow with a sitcom that has made you laugh before. And when you do laugh, consider pausing the show for a moment to just revel in how funny that was. Allow your laughter to continue for as long as it lasts, because science has shown that on top of endorphins, laughter causes a release of the brain's natural serotonin. Have any of you been told you were depressed lately and maybe prescribed antidepressants? Many of those prescriptions are designed to basically increase the serotonin in your brain. So, get yourself some vitamin L, because laughter has no adverse side effects and it won't interfere with antidepressants. In addition, laughter has an anti-inflammatory effect. Raise your hand if you've been dealing with inflammation. This is why regular laughter really could be your best medicine. Some will say it's a little dark to try to laugh in the middle of a brutal situation. Yeah, I'm here to tell you, the people who say that suck. I mean, I know we are basically in survival mode, but that doesn't mean we have to be joyless. I get it. If you're too devastated to laugh, don't push it. But the point is, just don't get stuck there. One of my children has a chronic illness that required repeated hospitalizations when he was little. I'm sure many of you can relate to the nail biter, that is, waiting for things to get better when you're in the hospital. So one morning, as I looked forward to a day of sitting by my son's bedside and waiting for more test results, I asked my Facebook friends to send me jokes, and I giggled my way through that hospital stay. Having a sense of humor didn't necessarily affect the outcome, but it sure made a difference while we were in the hospital. With all of this talk of laughter, it's important that you not rely on laughter to mask your negative emotions. As we talked about earlier, there is a grief process with long-haul illness, and if you don't acknowledge it now, it will just be brushed under the rug, and then that big carpeted lump of feelings will only trip you later in life. So go ahead, feel the sadness. In fact, give it a name and a personality. I personally recommend watching the movie Inside Out to better understand the important role of sadness in our lives. Fair warning though, that movie is like a full-on therapy session. You're gonna have all the feels, including laughter. So once you've acknowledged your sadness, remind yourself that this is not the only emotion you are capable of. Then, when you are good and ready, go get yourself some comedy. Stay tuned for my next video where we are going to discuss how to build a solid relationship with your medical team, and we will challenge the worldview that every sick person needs a diagnosis and a prognosis. And please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. I would really appreciate it, and it will allow you to get notices when new videos are posted. Also, if you know a long hauler who could use some support, please send them the link to this video so they can follow along in our conversation for long-haul COVID patients. In the meantime, take baby steps and get better, everybody.